Today is lesson 8.2, and today we're going to learn how to use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula can be used for every single equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And if you remember from yesterday, that this is the definition of a quadratic equation right here. So basically this formula can be used for every quadratic equation, unless you are asked to use a specific method. For example, yesterday we learned completing the square. And so if you were asked to find x by completing the square, you would need to use that strategy. However, if you are not specifically told what to do, you can always use the quadratic formula. This right here is the quadratic formula. It's something that you should take to memory. Make sure it gets on your note card. It's very, very important. This is the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And again, this can be used for any equation in this format. It is really, really important that you realize that the equation must be set equal to 0 in order to use this formula. Let's look at some examples of how we would solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So in this case, it says find x using the quadratic formula. Additionally, if it just said find x and didn't ask you to use a specific method, you could always use the quadratic formula. The first step whenever using the quadratic formula is to find a, b, and c. And you're going to define these three values. So in this case, a equals 12. I got it from right here. B equals negative 8. Very important that you keep those negative signs with their value. And C equals negative 15. Once you have these three variables defined, or these three letters defined, all you need to do is plug them into the equation from the last page. So in this case, I would rewrite this as x equals negative b. Now b is a negative value, so I'm going to write it in parentheses so I don't forget that it's a negative negative. Plus or minus the square root of b, so again, negative 8 squared. So you might want to keep your values that are negative in parentheses so you don't forget to do that in your equation, minus 4 times a, which is 12, times negative 15. That's all under the radical sign. Ran out of room there. This is all over 2 times 12. Next, you're going to simplify this by doing simple mathematical equations or operations. So, I can rewrite this as x equals negative negative 8. That makes it positive, so I'm going to write 8, plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared, which is 64. Then I'm going to multiply these values right here. So we have a negative 4 times 12 times negative 15. So I have two negative values, so I know it's going to become a positive value when I multiply all of those together. And if I plug that into my calculator, I'm going to get 720. So I'm going to write plus 720 down here. divided by 2 times 12, which is 24. Now I need to add these values together under the radical sign and factor. So let's go ahead on to the next page to do that. So again, I have 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 plus 720, so we can simplify that here to 784 using simple addition, divided by 24. Alright, so now I need to factor this, because we need to have this in its simplest form, which means we need to factor this big number. So I'm going to make a factor tree over here. 784. The factors of this are 4 and 196. Of course, you can use a calculator to figure these out if you don't know them. 4 goes down to 2 and 2. 196 goes down to 4 and 49. And 49 goes down to 7 and 7. 4 goes down to 2 and 2. Alright, so this is a nice number to factor because we have 3 pairs. So what we're going to pull out is 2 times 2 times 7. And we actually end up getting rid of the radical sign in this problem. So I can rewrite this as, well, let's simplify this. 2 times 2 is 4 times 7, so 28. And that gets rid of the radical sign because every number, every prime factor has a pair. So I can rewrite this then as 8 plus or minus 28 divided by 24. Then we can just go ahead and actually do the math. So in the last problem, I told you could leave plus or minus as like an answer in the form with plus or minus, and that would be it. However, in this case, we have 2 different numbers, and we need to simplify them all the way down. So I'm going to rewrite this as 8 plus 28 divided by 24, and 8 minus 28 divided by 24. When we do the math, 8 plus 28 equals 36 over 24. 8 minus 28 is negative 20 over 24. And these 2 fractions can also be simplified. That's a really bad comma. Let's fix it so it's obvious. Alright, so we're going to go ahead onto the next page and we're going to simplify these fractions. 36 over 24 and negative 20 over 24. This equals 6 over 4, which equals 3/2. And this equals negative 5 over 6. So x equals 3/2 and negative 5/6. And that would be your final answer. It is important that you always simplify your answers down to their simplest fraction form. You can leave them in fraction form, you can leave them in improper fraction form, but they must be in the simplest form for full credit. So please make sure you're doing that. Alright, let's look at another example problem. So in this example, it just says solve for x. So that means that I can use any method I want. I want to use the quadratic formula because I like to use the quadratic formula. However, this equation is not currently in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I need to make it equal 0. That's pretty easy. All I need to do is add 3 to both sides. So I would rewrite this as 5x squared plus 8x plus 3 equals, these cancel out, and now I have them equal to 0. So no problem, really easy to set the equation equal to 0. Now I need to define my variables. A equals 5, B equals 8, and C equals 3. All positive numbers, that's nice. Now I can plug them into the quadratic formula. So step 2 is to plug them into the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is negative b, so I have negative 8, sorry, we should write x equals, plus or minus the square root of 8 squared, because it's b squared, so 8 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. Whoops, we were supposed to replace that a. So all divided by 2 times a, which is 5. So we can simplify this to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared is 64 minus 4 times 5 is 20 times 3 is 60. So minus 60, all divided by 2 times 5, which is 10. All right, so let's simplify this. We've got let's see, sorry, go back, negative 8 plus or minus square root of 64 minus 60, so we can just put in a 4, nice and simple, divided by 10. This one's even easier because when we factor 4, that's pretty simple. 2, we get rid of the square root sign again, so we get x equals negative 8 plus or minus 2 divided by 10. Remember, this is 2 different answers. We've got negative 8 plus 2 over 10 and negative 8 minus 2 over 10. This simplifies to negative 6 over 10, which becomes negative 3 over 5, one of our answers. And then this one becomes negative 10 over 10, which simplifies to negative 1. So your answers for this problem are negative 3/5, comma, negative 1. Now, in some cases, you might not have a nice, beautiful factor that gets rid of the radical sign here. If that's the case, you can leave it in simplest form. In the simplest form, when this doesn't factor perfectly, we'll have a radical sign in it.